known. Peace and love, everybody, and welcome to Let It Be Known. I'm Niele Anderson. Stacy is out today, but he will be back. But that doesn't mean that the world keeps turning and headlines don't keep impacting and uplifting the Black experience. So tomorrow, this morning, we're going to have some conversations with some voices from across the United States. We're going to talk about Prop 50. We're also going to talk about gun ownership as well as bringing a reverend and a pastor and a doctor into the conversation of this Marvin Sapp and Marvin Wyans conversation about church offerings, how we do them, is it right, is it wrong, and maybe having to move into the next generation of approaching things differently instead of old school church. So we're going to talk about it all. Great conversations. But first, chat, I'm going to need you guys to chime in and fill in for Stacy and give your opinions. So let's start off with Greer's producer pick of the morning.
Why you should stop giving all of your data to these companies. You're ceding a lot of control and agency of your life without actually getting much in return now. There used to be a time, I think, when there was kind of a fair trade-off of, okay, I get a little bit more convenience, I get some kind of technology that I've never gotten before, I get to connect with my long-lost elementary school friend. But we have reached a point where these companies, they have gotten so much economic and political leverage. They're developing such a controlling influence over all spheres of society, including scientific production, including geopolitics, that they are reaching, or I believe have reached, an inflection point where they can start acting in their self-interest with basically no consequence. And originally, the bargain of giving data to companies is they will give you something in return. But these companies have reached empire status where they don't actually have to give you anything in return anymore.
But what about the way Grok can give me a demented photo of Bill Gates and Elon Musk having lunch? Isn't that a exchange? Or summarizing a very, very dense 89-page P&L report into something I can quickly make a decision on. Is that a fair exchange in your
Grok is a great example of how these companies operate, because in order to train Grok, Elon Musk set up a supercomputer called Colossus in the Memphis, Tennessee area and completely hijacked local democratic processes to put it up as quickly as possible and start powering it with unlicensed methane gas turbines that are now pummeling that area with huge amounts of air pollution, talking about Black and brown communities. And so, yes, there are certainly interesting utilities that come out of these tools, and there's certainly people that actually benefit a lot from using these tools. But the supply chain of producing these tools has already illustrated to us the logic of what's happening here, which is that these companies don't actually care about preserving people's right to even clean air in order to ultimately produce something that they are trying to use to then accumulate more data and get more money. Here's why.
Interesting conversation. Chat, feel free to chime in. But I think she brings an interesting point, and we know that Elon Musk facility that she's talking about, the NAACP, has filed a lawsuit because of the impact that it's having on communities. And a lot of times we don't think that technology really has impact on local communities. You just think it's all up in the sky and in our phones, but all of those hard drives and grids have to be housed somewhere. And I think she brings up a perfect example of what that means. Feel free to chime in, chat. But we also have some more headlines to get into. First up, it looks like Jasmine Crockett is thinking about a run for Senate. Now, we have heard this before, but she finally made the conversation something of interest when she talked about it on a recent episode of a show on Sirius Radio. And also this has to do with as we look at Texas and redistricting, she might be pushed out of her seat to run off against somebody. So she has to think about different options for herself. And Senate could look like the next progression for her as well. Let's jump over to the ACLU, who is sounding the alarm after Donald Trump issued a memo titled Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. And of course, he's referencing the No Kings protests that happened. So organizations believe that it's a setup to target organizers and protesters. And I'm talking about organizations like No Kings. You can think about organizations like Black Lives Matter, even organizations like Black Voters Matter, as you know, they loaded up 4 buses to go to the Supreme Court to stand in protest to what's happening as we look at voting rights being gutted from people of color. And so, as we look at what Donald Trump is doing and we think about before the Biden administration left, the number one terrorist threat to this country was white folks, white men in particular. And so to have that threat that is still there erased, and for him to go after protesters or organizers that are advocates against those types of behaviors is something scary, and we should all pay attention to. Let's look in the chat and see what's happening. Good morning, Lady Leo. Good morning, Sandra. Also, Michelle Madison is always holding it down over there on Facebook for us. And Orangey, you said I don't have money to donate to the pastor's new helicopter, jet, or Mercedes. Oops, I mean building funds. Okay, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Or maybe we can jump into it right now. So let's do it. Since Orangey, you want to talk about church folks, I think I have the perfect guest for you to have this discussion. But first, Marvin Sapp has joined the conversation. And he's weighed in on Bishop Marvin Winans' offering debate. He said the pastor says, why is it such a problem for pastors to raise money for their ministries? Why are they getting dragged? He says, this is Marvin Sapp. He says, while creators profit off of church controversy but get praise, he said different motives, saying monetization. So that's interesting. But joining us now to have this conversation is Dr. Najuma Smith. Dr. Najuma Smith is a pastor, as well as she comes out of the USC program called Pass the Mantle, which was started by the legendary Reverend Cecil Chip Murray. It's a great program over at USC. So let's bring Dr. Najuma in. Can we get Dr. Najuma in? All right, let's go to the chat while we get Dr. Najuma in. And let's see, we have Mike V. Good morning. You said, Niele, in regards to data center in Tennessee, keep in mind Black folks make up less than 1% of AI developers and less than 5% of cybersecurity professionals. We need our people to participate in tech. I totally agree with that. When you look at even what's happening over in other countries, they are training kids as soon as kindergarten over in China about AI and technology. And over here, it's more of a social engagement and fun tool. But other countries are starting in elementary school to train their kids, to train a whole generation to be prepared for technology. There was another story that came out of Amazon that over 5,000 jobs are going to be raised. I think it's by 2033. And it's going to be all robots. And so we need to own some of these companies that build the robots. Okay. Technology is not always just about having an app. it's about maybe the semiconductors or the pieces that it takes to make the app, or the programmers. And so I totally agree with you that we do need to do that. um
Here I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We were just talking about, and I'll bring you in on this conversation. We're talking about, technology, and how, technology is taking over, Black people being stakeholders in it. But what are your thoughts about how we're moving into this whole technology space, and where do Black people fit into all of this?
Right. So this was a real time lesson, right? Because I had a little technology challenge a second ago and was delayed getting in on the conversation regarding Marvin Winans. But let me say this. I visited China about 7 years ago. And one of the things that I saw and even our tour guide shared with us is that the children there are in school 7 days a week. They're in school 7 days a week, Monday through Saturday. And Saturday is specifically, well, not specifically, but oftentimes they are going to school for a specific thing, either the arts or technology. And so they have their 5 days a week, like normal, with strict instruction. And then they have Saturday and Sunday. Well, we like to use Sunday maybe to be a day of luxury, a day of resting. For them, it's a day of practice. So whatever their skill set is that they're honing in their children, that's the day of practice. And so there's a whole nother level of discipline in other countries, on all subjects, but especially around technology. And our young people are unfortunately behind as it
Mhm.
relates to training. And so I just, so that's what I know about it. It's like we're just behind as with training. And even in other countries like India and even parts of Africa, the the rate in which young people are going to school and the way they see school. When I visited Africa, they see school and the opportunity to go to school as a privilege, as something very important. Whereas sometimes, as parents, we fussing to get our kids to get up and go to school, starting as early as middle school. And so there's a different level of appreciation and discipline, especially around the arts and technology, but technology being really key because they understand if they can master the technology piece, they can master the world. And for them, it's a matter of business. It's not a matter of what I like and what I prefer. It's a matter of business. They're trained as children to think about what they can do so that they can have a business, so they can run a business.
I think you bring up a good point about education being a privilege,
Hmm.
as to how we look at it over here and having to get our kids to go to school, and how even we look at, when we think of technology, we look at it as a social aspect,
Right,
how it's fun, how it's
right,
engaging.
right,
We don't look at it as a business,
right,
to what you were just saying. And I
right,
think that is an important switch that, we're going to have to make, not just in our Black communities, but overall as a country. But
right,
of course, it's going to be most important to us,
right.
if we can get our community engaged in
Yeah,
a more important way as an
right.
education piece instead of just a social.
Absolutely. And I'll even add this, Neil. I was born, in 72. And so when I came through high school, there were classes that were taught because they want to make sure you could work. You could be in business, right? And so
Mhm.
so like typing and when computers came out, it was not taught as like, oh, as an elective, but it was more so when you get out of high school, when you get out of college, you're going to need to know how to work. You're going to be equipped to know how to work. And so those kinds of courses, those kinds of programming, very few exist anymore. You're hard
Mhm.
pressed to find a class for your young person that gears them that prepares them with a skill set so that
Mhm.
they can work. And so, and technology being that as well. Our young people, unless we take them to something after school or on the weekends or there's a special programming, they're not getting any training in technology. I did a workshop with some teenagers recently, and there was
Mhm.
3 young people that had never touched a computer. They're like, I've never been on a computer before. And I'm not
Wow.
talking about babies, I'm talking about teenagers.
Wow.
It had
I
never been.
know
That doesn't even make sense in this world, in this
it
life,
doesn't.
to not, for every young person to say that they've not been on a computer before. And also, when you think about other countries, they learn English not because they want to speak American. They learn English because English is the language of business. That's the
Mm.
difference. They're
So they're basically they're being trained with the mindset. Dr. Joni says, yes, I took typing as a class in high school. Yeah, home economics typing.
yeah,
I know when I was in high school, there was a program called Scrock. And
right.
if you signed up for it, you would get bused. You would have a
Yep,
job after school,
yep,
whether it was in fashion
yeah,
or maybe you wanted to be a like a trade school,
right,
right?
right, right.
Electricians,
Yeah.
painting, culinary.
You
They
you
just
left
don't
high
do it
school with a
anymore.
skill set. Yeah. You
Yeah,
left high school with a skill set. And so, and I think that puts, and so the skill set now is around technology, all the different facets of technology, but the programming is not available because it's no longer part of your learning process. It's like, well, if the school can afford it, programming, if someone is available, to
right.
to,
And
to put it
you
on,
would
but
think
it's
that, and when you look at what's happening with the Department of Education and how
right.
they are cutting so
They're
much
cutting.
when they should be
Absolutely.
looking at how to advance in
Absolutely.
technology in our
Absolutely.
education system. But I want to
Absolutely.
get to the chat.
Yes.
Dr. Marilyn says home economics wasn't big during my time. We learned to
Mm,
cook, sew, table etiquette, and
yeah.
much more. Table etiquette,
Yeah.
knowing what fork to
For,
use
for
when
fork
you're
to use.
out
Yeah.
at a dinner.
Absolutely.
You at a business
Absolutely.
dinner.
Absolutely. What to
Uh,
wear at a business dinner. Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
Aquarius says the amount of pressure that is put on Chinese education isn't good, causes high rates of depression. And Daniela says I agree. However, at the same time, we must ensure that all communities have at least the access to connect to
Absolutely.
internet technology.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the digital divide is still a thing. That is so true. That is
Right.
so true.
And I totally agree with sis that when you think about the Chinese culture, the pressure, there is extreme pressure. And but we're talking about economics, right? And so I totally agree. There's pressure, but when you think about economics, and there's no way there's no way for there to make America great again plan, and you are not raising the bar on our youth access, as well as institutionalizing to some degree their access to technology. We will always have to farm out jobs and farm out technologies to other countries and other countries, because we're not raising the bar on our own young people. And so I totally agree, and I'm not suggesting that we actually do what they're doing. I'm just saying that's the difference, which is why you can have a young person come here and they can get the tech job at the age of 21, and our 21-year-old is still trying to figure out if they want what they want to do with their life. And again, I'm not saying it's it's 100% right. I'm just saying that when you talk about the competition in
Right.
economics, the competition in the workforce, our young people are by far behind,
Totally
even though we
behind.
claim to be this country that is so magnificent, and we are. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else, but when it comes to how we educate our young people, we are actually behind.
All right, a couple more comments before we get into the conversation while you're
Yes.
here. Mike V says we also have digital literacy issues with our
Yep.
elderly and senior folks,
Yeah.
as well, with deep fakes and scamming them out of their life savings. And Dr. Marilyn says Department of Education tossed those programs. Students would also come out of school with
Yeah.
a cosmetology
Yep.
license, which is
Yep.
true. They don't do this anymore. And so I think bringing up the elderlies, I mean, and I want to pivot that into the role of the Black church,
Yes.
because we're talking about education, but it used to be where the Black church also filled in some of these
Yes.
gaps,
Yep.
and different ministries within the
Right.
church could tell the elderlies and seniors
Absolutely.
about what's happening, right?
Right.
And maybe even having some STEM programs that teach you art and technology.
Absolutely.
And all of those programs need what? Funding. So let's talk
Yep.
about the funding.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, because
You see how I did that?
yeah, I love it. That was smooth. That was a good segue.
I
And
did that.
so, because it is our history, right? Because it is the history of the Black church to have to fund its own process, projects, and projects and progression, right?
Mhm.
Whatever area we want to grow in, it is our responsibility to fund that. And so you do have the church having a history of doing what we call the building fund, because the Black church does not have has not historically has not had access to capital to do things like repair the roof or buy new property. There's always been and I'm a pastor, and I can say that even in the 21st century, there's always been this challenge of funding for expanding the asset, which is the building, expanding the ministry um, capability and capacity. And so we've always had to raise our own funds. And a large part of fundraising is from within the church. So fundraising campaigns is nothing new to the Black church. Doing what we saw happen in Pastor Winans church, having particular days of giving. It was always around rallying the people around a movement or around an opportunity. Now, does the church also have, not for everyone, but is there some historical context around the building fund not being appropriated properly? Yes, we have seen it. Some of us have experienced where there have been churches that have been raising money for the building fund for years, only
Right.
for the building to never get built, only for the roof to never get replaced, only for the new cameras to never get purchased. So all of those things do exist. And you also have building funds that have fully, fulfilled their commitment to to
Right.
create, to buy new real estate and to enlarge, to do some capacity building. So what
I,
we saw, oh, I'm
Wait,
sorry.
I wanna just jump in. Mike V
Yeah.
says faith and technology, what a great collaboration.
Oh,
That would be
absolutely.
great to see the churches do that.
Yep.
And so we're talking about funding, we're talking about faith and this conversation that is happening
Yes.
in the pop culture community
Yes.
about things that happen in the Black church, which
Yeah.
sometimes become misunderstood
Sure.
because
Yeah.
of a soundbite.
Yeah.
And so we saw this clip come out about Marvin Sapp, telling a woman that her offering wasn't sufficient and he
Yeah.
pushed her away. Then you saw the next day Fred Hammond, and even people like Ricky Smiley come out and says context matters, and then they
It
drop
does.
the whole video. And then the next day you see the woman and
Yeah.
Marvin and Pastor Winans on the Detroit news station saying it wasn't what it looked like. But then
Yes.
you have the outsiders who maybe not understand church
Familiar.
culture so much, still saying it still wasn't right.
Yeah.
So from your pastoral leadership,
Yeah.
understanding Black church culture, what's your take on this
Right.
situation?
So, and thank you. And I'm going to start and I'm go back to a little bit what I says. So it's important for people to understand that fundraising campaigns within the Black church has a historical context because of lack of access to capital and resources to do these bigger projects. Now, so now we arrive at what we saw, the soundbite, the snippet with a Pastor Winans having people line up to bring their offering, right? So this was a campaign that they had been working on. And I'm not making an excuse for what he said, but I think we do have to understand why was that even happening? Because that is the historical context. And so we arrive at this point and a woman comes up, and what we now understand is that he had called for a particular group of people who had a particular amount to come up at the time, and she doesn't have the amount that's asked. And I will say this: was his response disrespectful, out of order? And the answer is full stop, yes, it was. We can, and you can even hear the people laugh and with that kind of nervous laugh. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was like, it was the nervous laugh, and you can hear it. And so we can say, yes, it was rude. It was out of order. It could have been said differently. Full stop. Not making excuses for it. And I will say this, and I said this to you, Niele, because I'm a pastor. And I'm a woman. Had I responded that way to anybody, male or female, young or old, I would have been torn to shreds. It would have been a way different response.
And you think that's because you're a woman?
Oh, absolutely, because I'm a woman. And because we understand also in the Black church, not everywhere, but there is still patriarchal kind of, we give the fathers of the church, the men of the church, a little more leeway. And that happens. I mean, I experience it as a pastor. There are things that I cannot say and I cannot do because I am a woman, that people would let a man do because he's a male and he's a pastor and and it's just and patriarchy is in the church, and not just the Black church. Patriarchy exists in the church, and that is a reality. And so two things can exist at the same time. This can be out of order, and Pastor Winans and his member cannot be, they may not be at odds, right? Because but from those of us, for those on the outside looking in, it can feel very offensive. It can feel like, well, she should have taken her money back and all these things. And I think if we were talking, if that incident was just that those few seconds isolated, yes, I think there probably would have been a different response. But we can't talk about it without understanding history. And I would say this, and you and I talked about this, is that Pastor Winans, there's a culture in every church. Every church has a culture. Every church, every leader has a way in which they flow with their members. And the members know when the pastor is joking, when the pastor is being cheeky, when the pastor, is upset. And so all of those things we need to understand exist even in this context, even in this situation. But was it rude? Yes.
I want to we're running short on
Okay.
time, but I wanted to get to our last point that we discussed, and talking about the old church versus the new church and the new way of doing things.
Right.
And you talked
Yes.
about how millennials and Gen Zs, it's a totally different process. So I wanted you to talk about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I mean, and again, the whole line thing and, raising by denominations, that is also an older, a traditional way of raising funds, right? And you would be hard pressed to go to a church where the pastor is not putting up on the reader board how people can give through Givelify and Tithely and all these other options. So a lot of people have never even seen that kind of interaction around raising funds. There are a lot of people that have not put money in a basket or not been in line. They give right off their cell phones. We do it at our church. There are a number of churches that no longer do baskets. They no longer do offering lines. And so even that context can make something like that seem really, odd and weird. And so all of those things are happening at the same time. But was it rude? Was it out of order, disrespectful? That few seconds, yes, we can say that it could have been said differently. And we would hope that all of us learn that when we are interacting with people, that there's always better ways. And going back to the technology piece, I think even in church, we have to realize the cameras are always rolling. In all spaces, the cameras always run. That's what it means to live in a technology age. Like the cameras always rolling. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so, but there's context, and two things can exist at the same time. That was rude. It was disrespectful. And there was a culture at that church that people obviously are familiar with, and clearly from their own statements that we've seen so far, that there's no offense, but we can look at it and say, hey, how can we do better? I think that's the bigger question, is all of us looking at something like that and saying, how can we do better when we interact? And certainly for me as a pastor, it helps me to be mindful of even the things that I might say that may be a joke or maybe cheeky, but a 1 second clip can change everything.
I mean, I really appreciate you joining us
Yeah,
this morning. And I think the takeaway is the cameras are always
the
rolling.
camera's always rolling.
And that's mostly not to the parishioners, but to the pastors.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because we're leadership. We're
Right.
leadership. And so we own that, and we're leadership. And so there's always opportunity for us to do better and grow in this technology driven age.
Thank
Absolutely.
thank you so much for waking up this morning
No
and bringing
worries.
your
My pleasure.
insight. It was very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Neil. Have a blessed day.
You too.
All right.
All right. Let's keep it moving with CBS has a new poll and it finds California's Prop 50 support is motivated by national focus and opposition to Trump. Now, many movements across California are joining the push for a yes on Prop 50. Joining us now is one of those organizations to discuss why California redistricting is important to their organization. She's with Black Women for Wellness Project, Action Project. Welcome, Anyama Obekia. Anyama Obekia. Can we bring Anyama in? Anyama, there you are. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you?
Anyama, thank you for joining us this morning. I think you're freezing on us. Can you hear? Oh, you're muted.
Forgive me.
That's
Good
okay.
morning. How's
Good
this?
morning. Anyama. Oh, I love your backdrop. That's the famous Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
We
we go ahead.
we'd argue that she is Black Women for Wellness Action Project's one of Black Women for Wellness Action Project's patron saints.
And I think a lot of people know Fannie Lou Hamer for being into politics and an organizer, but I don't think people understand that she had some health issues and challenges within the healthcare system, which would make her a champion for Black women for wellness. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you have her as one of your champions?
Yes, yes. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Niele, for having us on the show this morning. My name is Onya Mobiekia, and I'm here on behalf of Black Women for Wellness Action Project. And so, Fannie Lou Hamer is just an icon, right, when it comes to politics and organizing Black folks and engaging us in the political process. And so, for that reason, yes. But you also alluded to the health issues, right? You know, Miss Ancestor, Fannie Lou Hamer also was a survivor of what's known as the Mississippi appendectomy, right? And that was a coin termed around, like, in the South predominantly, right, where Black women and people of color were sterilized without their consent, right? They'd go in for treatment for a particular health concern, and without their consent, without their permission, without their knowledge, often, right, under state sanctioned sterilization protocols, they would be sterilized. So she was one of the victims of the so-called Mississippi appendectomy, where Black mamas and birthing people, or Black people capable of giving birth, were stripped of their ability to do so, right? And so, as an organization that is committed to the health and well-being of Black women and girls, as an organization that's deeply committed to and grounded in reproductive justice, which is the right to have a child and the right to not have a child. And in the event that you do have children, that you're able to raise them with dignity in safe and sustainable environments, and the right to just bodily autonomy and sexual pleasure. And so, if, sterilization, or, for instance, like a tubal ligation, is a reproductive health procedure that we advocate tubal ligation is something we advocate for in the event that a mama or a person capable of giving birth wants the procedure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we advocate for it with full consent, right? With
Mm.
um, full knowledge
Right.
of the procedure and what the implications are for your fertility, right? And ancestor Fannie Lou Hamer was among many, many women, right, across the country, even here in California, were stripped of that right to determine whether or not they could, carry a pregnancy, and that
Mm.
is atrocious. And so, she is an icon in the sense that she's a survivor of this atrocity sanctioned by the state, but she's also just a fierce, fierce advocate for our rights, for our dignity, for for our participation, Black people's participation in the political process.
Thank you so much for setting the tone. We're talking to Anyama Obekia. She is from Black Women for Wellness and Black Women for Wellness Action Project, which is a reproductive justice organization. And we're setting the tone for for Proposition 50, which is a redistricting that was commissioned by Governor Newsom to combat what's happening in Texas. And we're connecting the dots as to why this is just not a political action to balance out Congress, but we're also talking about why it matters, because representation matters. Organizations like yours matter. So talk to us about why Black Women for Wellness Action Project has endorsed Yes on 50.
Black Women, thank you, Niele. Yes, Black Women for Wellness Action Project has endorsed Prop 50 because it's critically important for reproductive justice and the health, well-being, and dignity of our communities, that we have a functioning democracy, right? And Prop 50 gives us an opportunity, gives Californians an opportunity to stand up and fight back for fair representation. We know that decisions made in Congress have direct implications for what's going on here in California. I think HR 1, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, others, we refuse to acknowledge it as that. We'll just call it HR 1, which was the Republican-led reconciliation bill, budget bill, makes historic cuts to programs and healthcare services that actually ensure that our communities are able to thrive. And that is devastating, right? With $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, that has implications for California's budget, because nearly 35% of California's budget comes from federal funds. And nearly 70% of those federal funds support our Medi-Cal program. And so, as a reproductive justice organization, we know that Medi-Cal California's Medicaid program pays for anywhere from 40 to 50% of the births that take place in our state, right? And when it comes to supporting births for Black mamas and birthing people, that number is higher, right? Mm-hmm. So cuts to Medi-Cal programs have direct implications for our community's access to healthcare, right? Whether it's maternal and infant healthcare to just general access to care, right? Historic cuts to SNAP benefits, right? Here in California, that has implications for our CalFresh program. It threatens benefits for food for about 5 million people here in our state. Right? So reproductive justice, yes, it's about our access to abortion care. It's our access to maternal infant health care, but it's really grounded in the human rights framework that just says our communities have a right to live with dignity. Our communities have a right to thrive in this world, and we deserve the resources and supports to help us do that. And, when we send folks to Congress who are beholden to Trump, right? And the Trump administration's cruel, cruel agenda, right? Then that has implications for our access to resources, which has implications for our ability to live with dignity and thrive. And so, yes, it's about maps and lines, but it's really about our community.
It is so much so. And you touched on like different programming that Black Women for Wellness, the one that does the community work. Can you talk about some of the programs that might be impacted by the government shutdown? Because when we look at what's happening, Congress could move all of this ahead and make the country function properly, make resources flow the way that it should. But they're holding a lot of things up. So, can you talk to some of the ways that the Black Women's for Wellness can be impacted if they don't get certain funding from the state due to the federal government pulling back dollars?
Yes. So I'll say that, Black Women for Wellness is our, or the arm of our organization that does, that works with outreach, education, and we work in coalition space with many, many organizations to achieve our work. And what we are seeing is even, since the administration has taken hold, its attacks on, diversity, equity, inclusion, its executive orders that have, dictated, what we can and can't say, right? And has held back funding based on, the kind of work that organizations like ours do, has really had a chilling effect, and has an impact on our ability to carry out our work. And so, it's stopped us from, and coalitions that we work within, from being able to really, it's made us really think about how we go about our work. Now, Black Women for Wellness and Black Women for Wellness Action Project, we're unapologetically Black. And we are, one of the things we're not going to do, right? Because this is not the first time that we've been asked to kind of quiet how we show up and how we advocate for Black families, right? Throughout the years, there's always been like questioning about how unapologetic we are in terms of our support for Black folks, right? How unwavering we are, how loud we are about that. And, one thing we'll do is never back down on our mission, because we understand that if we aren't for us, who's going to be for us, right? Like we are all we have. And so we're doing our best to ensure that we stand and protect our communities.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're speaking with Anyama Obekia from Black Women for Wellness Action Project. And you are, yes, on Prop 50, and you're out here in the communities, LA community streets, making sure that voters know when to fill out their ballots, to early vote. And so we appreciate you, and we look forward to having you guys come back next week to give us more information and talk more about doulas. I waited for that conversation because our co-host, Stacy, his daughter is a doula. And so I know he would be happy to talk to your organization, as you all are huge advocates for the doula ministry.
Yes. Thank you so much, Niele.
All right. Peace and love.
Oh, Thank you.
That's okay. All right, bye-bye. All right, we're going to keep it moving. We had another conversation that we talked about yesterday. And this one is for the fellas. It's for the ladies too. I mean, I think we all need to talk about this. And I'm talking about owning our Second Amendment right. There's a lot happening right now. And the conversation was yesterday. Don Lemon said that Black and brown folks need to be gun owners. So joining us now from Black Firearms Awareness and Safety Training is Lasheen Taylor. Good morning.
Good morning, Niele. How you all doing?
We are good. So let's talk about it. Don Lemon is telling Black and brown folks you might want to start thinking about your Second Amendment rights. And so we know that buying a gun is more than just buying it. But there are certain permits you have to have. There's some things that you need to know. So talk to us about your training, Black Firearms Awareness and Safety Training.
Okay, good. Thank you, Niele. Thanks for having me on the show. I've been speaking to a lot of people that actually are terrified, and they scared to death to go outside. They scared to death to call the police. They scared to death to just exist. So I knew there was a problem, and that problem came out of fear, something that was taboo for so many years of guns are bad, guns are this, and guns are that. But guns is the way this country was won. Blood, sweat, guns, tears, all that put together, those same guns that people are afraid of is the same gun that could save your life. And people kept saying, well, is it real that you can go outside with a firearm? Can you actually have it? Is it real? Absolutely. There's a way that you have to do it. You have to get educated. You have to get trained. You should be insured so that if you have a self-defense incident, you can fight your case on the street. So my new wave with BFAS is that the old way of getting in trouble in a self-defense situation and just going to jail forever, that's out. The new wave is get some type of self-defense liability insurance, get yourself trained so you can fight your case on the street. Much, much better than the old system.
Okay, so we're talking about gun training. We have Lasheen Taylor with Black Firearms Awareness and Safety Training. So let's just take me for example. I'm thinking about purchasing a gun. What type of guns do you recommend for first-time gun buyers?
For females, of course, your hands are much smaller. So I would say something that'll fit in your hand, doesn't have a lot of recoil, something that you can easily conceal in the bra and the purse or wherever you choose to have it so that it's readily accessible. And make sure you just got to get the right one that fits a person, the female. For the males, I would suggest something the same way, but of course, we're a little bit stronger. Most men have bigger hands. So something that you can handle that just doesn't have a lot of recoil, because the recoil is going to be something that may not send that round where you want it.
And so what type of license or permit does a person have to carry a gun?
So in California, every state is different, of course. You have to have what we call, to keep the firearm on your person, you have to have a CCW, which stands for Concealed Carry Weapons or License Permit. That's what you get qualified through a certified instructor through the state. Once you get those knocked out, then you can actually keep the firearm on your person. California is super expensive. There's a lot of fees associated with it, a lot of gun laws associated with it, a lot of training you have to go through just to be able to exercise that right to keep that firearm on you.
And what's the price range for guns?
Oh man, depends on what county you live in.
Oh, that you got excited about that question.
Yeah. Because all the different counties. Are you saying the price range for guns or price range for actual the license to get the gun?
Well, let's do both, guns and license. Let's start with the license and then move to the gun.
Okay, so with the guns, the license, they can range. So there's a series of things you have to pay for. You have to first get a initial part of your interview. Sometimes you have to pay prior to the oral interview. Some places make some count. I'm talking about based on where you live. You have to pay a certain amount, 150, 200 something dollars, and then you have to pay the ending part of it before you pick up your license, somewhere around $300 or $400 for the total. Depends on what state, what county you live in. Then you have to pay processing fees. You have to pay all these different. There's so many fees you have to pay. Fingerprints. Then you have to pay all these different fees for different. It's complicated when it comes to the fees. But if you get a firearm, there's only one fee. You got to have an FSC card. Once you take that test, then you're able to purchase a weapon, and you got to put a percentage down, or you can buy the whole gun outright. 10 days later, you can go pick it up.
Some of the chat is saying, Patricia says, great info, liability insurance. Mike V says 38 revolver, Niele, Rugger, LCR. Dr. Joni says, organized militia is very different than owning guns to get the bad guy. There are more guns than people in this country, more likely to harm yourself or ones in the home than an unknown criminal. EC says people need God heavily as judgment day come. I know in the Bible it's written, thou shalt not kill. Dr. Joni also says more guns are not the answer by far. Most gun owners believe in reasonable gun control rules and regulations. And I think that is so true. I think that the conversation is that just like we talk about immigration reform, we need gun reform. We know that we don't need military weapons on the street. But we also see a rise in something that's happened in our country that we haven't seen for a long time. And I think that the Second Amendment right is for us just as much as it is for them. And the best way to approach it is in a safety matter. And that's why we have Roger. It's pronounced Roger. Okay, so are you familiar with that gun, Roger?
Is it Roger or Ruger?
Ruger. Oh, Ruger.
I've seen it. I haven't actually shot with it. I'm familiar with it, yes.
Okay. And then somebody, Tatisha says, can I come from San Bernardino County and train in your area?
Absolutely.
So talk to us about how to get more information.
So you can get more information at BFAST in LA. That's all one, BFAST, the letter N, LA.com. It gives you a breakdown. The site is still under somewhat of a construction, but you can get a lot of information. We'll be hosting a grand opening in about the first, hopefully if everything goes well, the first week of December. And we'll be talking, we'll be setting up to educate people about the Second Amendment, when you can use that firearm to protect yourself, when to stop shooting, the different types of ammo, covering the Second Amendment. We're going to talk to you about different things when it comes to traveling with your weapon, child safety, etiquette, firearm education, escalation, de-escalation, all the things that circumvent around that weapon, what you need to know when you get pulled over with law enforcement, how to prevent those interactions from going bad. So there's a lot of stuff to cover, and people should not be afraid to go outside with your weapon. Like I said in the videos, it's hat, check, firearm, check, ammo, extra magazines, check, firearm license, driver's license, everything that you need to make sure that when you leave out that door, you come back home safely.
You mentioned bullets. Are there some bullets that are more deadly? I don't know. Are there some bullets that are more deadly than others? You know, if you just want to, you want to harm them, but because I've heard some bullets, like, they spray inside of you. Some have direct impact. Is that true?
Absolutely. So we want to change our language in conversation. And I know I'm not beating you up. I'm just sharing something.
I don't know. Talk to me like I'm a first grader.
Okay, so I'll share something with you. What we want to use as the language is stop the threat. So a lot of people say, oh, I shot this. I said, you don't want to talk like that because those things can hurt you in court. What you want to do is, if a threat comes your way, then you stop that threat. So that's the language we want to use. When
Okay.
you stop a threat, you got to realize, number one, you have to make sure that if you don't stop that threat, that bullet goes through that person and hits somebody else. You're on the hook for all of that damage that round hits. So you got to make sure you train. If you use the wrong ammunition, that could happen. So the type of ammunition you should use for home defense is going to be different than outside in the field. The reason I say that because ammunition has a way to hit you, and it could hit you and stop and explode. Then some ammunitions have a way to go through you and keep going and keep going and keep going. So knowing and understanding the different types and where to use them and when to use them, it's extremely important. Hollow points are the ones that get in the cavities and they explode. The FMJs, full metal jacket, they can really go through you and do some damage and keep going and keep going and keep going.
Okay, so Michael Carter is saying, I struggle with if I really want to get a gun or just keep the pepper spray. I feel that way too, Michael, but I think I'm almost,
I got an answer for that one. Oh, that's a cool.
Okay. Go ahead, and then I'll keep. There's a couple more that I want to get to, but I'll let you answer that one first.
Pepper spray versus what was that? A gun? Okay. So if you show up to a fight and a guy has a knife and you're a female, you're already outnumbered, right? Because all you got.
Why am I showing up to a fight against a male?
Because sometimes it happens like that. Oh, let's say you didn't show up, but the situation presents itself. And there's a male that's coming after you and all you have is pepper spray, right? You have a higher chance of survival if you have a firearm than you would with pepper spray. Do you agree with that?
I figure if you shoot them in the eye and run, you're gonna disarm them for at least a good 3 to 4 minutes to give you time to get away.
Safety. That's education and training could address that. But generally, if you had a firearm, you would have more chance of survival than with pepper spray. And some women, some people in general choose to do the pepper spray, and that's fine. It's your choice. We just educate you on what could happen if you go either way. That's all. We just give information.
Orange G says use bear spray. Now, another one, Mike V wants to, can you ask Lasheen to speak on unjust arrest of Black men who are licensed to carry? I guess this was a story from last week or so with trumped up charges in Chicago.
Woo, that's a good topic. How much time we got?
Well, you got 60 seconds to answer that. To respond to Mike V.
Okay, so in my program, Be Fast, I designed what we call a CLEC card, Community Law Enforcement card. What it does, Community Law Enforcement Credential, CLEC. What this does is you present this to the officer when you get pulled over. It has your license, copy of registration, your insurance, your driver's license front and back, and has a copy of your CCW front and back. And it has some encrypted detailed information that a law enforcement officer, which I'm currently going through training right now, they'll be able to read this thing in 10 seconds to know if this person is an imposter or not. So the Fidel Castro situation where he presented he told the officer that he was armed and the officer killed him anyway. This card will prevent a lot of incidents like that from happening because it's clear that, look, I have a weapon, I have a CCW license. I'm presenting this to you in a one card application, not the back and forth, which is going to trigger the officer to think furtive movements. And now they're on the rebound to do something more serious. So this card I present my members, I give it to them when they register. They present that to the officer, and there's 100% clarity that either I have a weapon on board, or if I don't, I know the law. Big deal. That's going to reduce those amount of fatalities when officers and community members meet up.
Okay. Thanks for that brief answer. Appreciate it. So we can get through a couple more because we're just about out of time. Shonda responded to Dr. Joni saying, I think he's speaking from the standpoint of Second Amendment rights and being able to protect yourself and your family. Gun safety usage is what needs to be mandated throughout the U.S. So your program could be a model. Keep it going, Lasheen. Shonda also says gun safety training teaches you don't pull out a gun unless you plan to use it. It also emphasizes shoot to isolate the threat. Okay. Well, he's agreeing with you 100%, Shonda. And Nagan says these rips are no joke. Some states have outlawed them. You know what he's talking about? RIPS, rips?
I don't.
Okay. Org says use gun spray. Michelle Madison says, I'm not trying to put myself in situations like that. However, I would probably opt for pepper spray. My mother is a retired Baltimore police officer and advised me not to get a gun. She knows me for real, for real. And so go ahead.
Real quick. Audience, just understand this. Crime never takes a break. It's never going on vacation, and nobody's coming to save you. Nobody. You got to be ready to defend life when that time happens. It's going to happen one day. You don't know. Who knows?
I mean, who knows? But I think this conversation should be happening because our community are not having these, provocative, interesting conversations about the Second Amendment right. It does apply to us. And also it opens up the conversation to talk about how we do need gun reform. What is that? Oh, we do need gun reform.
You know what that means?
What does that mean?
That means for so long we were unaware how to utilize and understand the Second Amendment. Now the light is on. That light in that Be Fast logo, it means that our light is on now. So programs like mine can bring the education and awareness, the safety and the training to people so that they can understand that Second Amendment applies to you, man. You have the right to use that.
It's available to us. And so we would love to have you back. Our co-host Stacy is watching and he's mad that he's not here to have this conversation as well. And I'm sure he has some questions that I'm not even thinking about. So we would love to have you back. Keep this conversation going as our country goes backwards instead of forward. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Niele, for having me.
And give us the website one more time. Oh, can we get the website one more time? Well, Greer put it in the chat. Because it's time for us to go. We hope you have enjoyed these conversations, but I will give you a Black history fact today that is so relevant to what's going on in our country today. But this was the year of 1947, and the NAACP, led by W.E.B. Du Bois, submitted a petition to the United Nations titled An Appeal to the World to protest racial injustices, including lynchings, segregations, and inequalities in housing, education, healthcare, and voting rights. That year was 1947, and everything that W.E.B. Du Bois listed in the NAACP is applicable today under this Trump-Klan administration. Keep that in mind. We'll keep having these provocative, informative, and uplifting conversations right here on Let It Be Known. And for the latest in Black news, visit BlackPressUSA.com.